to make sense of life, death, and everything in between? Then you need to tune in to the You Only podcast with your host, Lo Jackson. This isn't just another podcast. This is a movement, a deep dive into the human experience where real conversations meet raw emotion and truth gets personal. Lo Jackson keeps it real, asking the questions most are afraid to face and giving you tools to grow, think, and live boldly. So if you're ready to stop surviving and start living, You Only is where your journey begins. Subscribe now. New episodes drop weekly. Available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen.
Imagine carrying a blueprint of love. It's not in ink, but in the living tissue of your brain. This blueprint whispers how you connect, how you trust, how you heal, and sometimes how you break. What if you could redraw the blueprint? What if love itself, through the science of our own biology, could rewrite your story? That's what a general theory of love is about. And that's the book that we're going over today. And it is not just a book, it's a life changer. So thank you for listening to the You Only podcast. The science and soul of love is what we're going to be talking about first. But think about this. The blueprint of love, it isn't just a romantic ideal. It's living, breathing framework for how we relate, connect, and grow with one another. Think of it as the architecture of emotional connection, each part supporting something sacred. Here's a deep and grounded breakdown of what the blueprint looks like. Foundation, self-awareness, and wholeness. Love begins within. Know your wounds, your patterns, desires. Bring a whole self, not a half hoping to be completed. Nobody wants that, and we have all experienced that in the dating world. You don't find love. You meet someone who mirrors the love you've already given yourself. Pillar 2, and this is the blueprint of love: trust, respect, and communication. Trust, built through consistency, not promises. Respect, valuing each other's uniqueness without trying to control or change. Communication, saying the hard things with softness. Listening to understand, not just to respond. Napoleon Bonaparte said, "I rule with an iron fist, but with a velvet glove." Without these, love topples under the weight of silence and assumptions. Pillar 3 are walls, boundaries, and safety. Walls of emotional safety is non negotiable. Set boundaries not to push love away, but to invite healthy connection. Mutual freedom inside commitment, not cages, only chosen closeness. Boundaries aren't walls to keep others out, they're doors that open to healthy love. The fourth pillar is windows, vulnerability. Let each other see in to your fears, joys, flaws. Transparency without shame. Be seen and still loved. True love can't exist behind masks. And some people are really, really well developed in wearing masks. And I had no idea that most people in the workplace now, they actually wear masks. To be vulnerable is to give someone the chance to hurt you and trusting they won't. And that's a hard thing to do, to really just compassionately open yourself up. And it's funny because that's what I thought life was about. I meet people and I try to connect on a deeper level. I try to really see their brain and understand their words and focus on what they're trying to express at the time we're having the conversation. So the fifth pillar would be shared vision, and this is the blueprint to love. A shared vision, love isn't just about now, it's about where you're going together. Shared values, dreams that align, not identical, but complementary. A shared direction gives love roots and wings. Because if you both believe in the end game and you're both working and striving to get there, you're ultimately going to create a bond and a relationship that is unbreakable. A shared direction gives love roots and wings. Think about it, it makes sense. The sixth pillar is garden, play, passion, growth. Keep it alive, flirt, laugh, explore. Water the relationship daily. Don't let routine choke it. Let each other evolve and cheer for every version of yourselves. That's the hardest thing we'll have to do in a relationship, I think, is once the honeymoon phase wears off and the power struggle begins, because that's the second phase of a relationship is the power struggle. And it can be daunting at times. And it can be really cumbersome. And you can feel really melancholy at that phase in that relationship because I think the last part I think of the third part of a relationship is, accepting and growing on with that person, or actually people get to that point and they end it because they just can't get over, the power struggle. So the garden says, let each other evolve and cheer for every version of yourselves in that moment. And that's important. So love grows when you nurture it with intention every day. It takes joy to do that. The seventh pillar is blueprint revision. What is your adaptability? Life changes. You change. Love must adapt. I made a saying up once, and it goes like this: times change, people change. I learned early on in life as a kid that several people I had come across and met and been in my life, they all of a sudden became somebody else, especially like relatives. But they were getting into a system where they had to go to work every day. They couldn't be so playful and joyful because they were getting into being responsible and, you know, going on to a hierarchy of life that they enjoyed and that gave them drive. And that's what people do. And I didn't know that at the time. But the blueprint revision, renegotiate needs, roles, love languages, flexibility over rigidity, curiosity over judgment. The strongest love is the one willing to evolve. And another thing I used to think too, the one who loves the least has the most power. But love is not something we fall into, it's something we build slowly, intentionally, with courage, care, and truth. And I find if that is worked on, cultivated, exercised, and adapted to, that you will become someone you never thought you could be, and the other person may as well. The science and soul of love talks about limbic resonance or emotional attunement between people. In your limbic resonance, do you study this stuff? Do you sit there in your own silence when you're with someone and try to see how in tune you are with them? Try to be an objectable observer sometimes in your relationships. You will really see the limbic resonance in those moments, the emotional attunement between you and that person. It also talks about limbic regulation, which is balancing each other's emotional states. And we all suffer from different imbalances due to things we eat, certain stressors in life that are out of our control, death, like I talked about in my last podcast, the denial of death. If you haven't listened to that one, go back and check it out. I thought that one turned out great. And a lot of people need to really slow down and try to see emotional patterns. That's an important part. And limbic regulation is, the balancing each other's emotion. Wow, if I could talk. The balancing of each other's emotional states is tough, especially when one of you aren't emotionally in tuned. My first marriage, we were both really actually mentally ill at that time. She was much older than me, and I had no idea where I was going, what I was doing, what life was about, no direction, totally misled, but just kept praying and going to church and doing what I could. And well, you know what? Later in life, in my 20s, I fell away and I went down the wrong road because I didn't understand. And that person I was with didn't understand the balancing of our emotional states was our duty for each other. You know, when I had a good day and somebody wasn't, I shouldn't have been so down and out, but other stressors can cause us to feel and think things too when we're in relationships, and a lot of things can, you know. Over time, things build up if we don't deal with them, and they cause so much emotional trauma and damage to our relationships that we don't even realize it at times, I feel. The Science and Soul of Love, chapter 1. Chapter 1 is the heart's castle, and it also talks about limbic revision or the rewiring of emotional patterns through healthy connection. And it really does taking us to find a relationship. 'Cause, I mean, you could be with somebody for 10 years and have no connection with them and always be down on yourself like you're doing something wrong. And then just one day you walk in and hey, boom, there's this huge connection, you know, and you can't walk away from that stuff. It happens in life and people change, and you can promise somebody and vow that you're going to be something and then tomorrow will be something totally different. But to not be that way, it takes a really strong, valued person, someone who has really a great understanding of morals, you know. Values are what's important to you, your core beliefs. And that drives everything in the person. And that leads into morals, which is I'll get the door for you. I don't think, abortion is right. I feel that I should be able to say what I want to whenever I want to. You know, those are morals. Morals lead into personal ethics. What you feel is right and wrong has a lot to do with emotions. And that's your limbic region of your brain. The emotional center of the brain is the limbic region. So another thing I want to talk about that I have talked about in previous podcasts is neuroplasticity. And that's the brain's ability to recognize itself by forming connections. So like when you walk into a gas station and somebody says, "Hey, how you doing?" You haven't seen them in a billion years, you know, and all of a sudden you boom, you light up like a Christmas tree because you're like, "Wow, you're still alive." Because that stuff happens. But that's your neuroplasticity changing at the drop of a hat. And it's out of your control. But every time your neuroplasticity has that shocking euphoric moment, it changes your paradigm and it makes you think differently. And I want to share a story with you. This is a therapist that read this book. And it completely changed her approach, focusing less on talking and more on feeling with them. Because it's hard to sit when you're with someone while he's screaming and yelling, you know, you F and B, you stupid, people do that stuff. And it's hard to sit there and resonate in those emotions and wonder why that person's so angry at the time when you love them so much that they would treat you like that. Emotional intelligence. That podcast tied into this, just like Goldman described, managing emotions. A general theory of love shows how relationships themselves manage our emotions. So if you want to go back and check out emotional intelligence, in the podcast Emotional Intelligence, Goldman describes managing emotions. This book, A General Theory of Love, shows how relationships themselves manage our emotions. Here's a chapter by chapter journey. Part 1, The Biology of Love. Chapter 1, The Heart's Castle. The aim of this chapter, it shows love as a biological force shaped by brain design. Where science meets poetry, our capacity for love isn't mystical, it's biological. Neurobiology is how the brain and nervous system create emotional life. And emotions are governed by your amygdala, your hippocampus, your medial lobes. Chapter 2, Kits, Cats, Sex, and Uncertainty. Its aim explores how science can study love without killing its mystery. Introduces the Truian brain model. Instinct, emotion, reasoning. Definition: ephemeral, fleeting, short-lived. Chapter 3, Archimedes' Principle. Its aim, emotional leverage, how every bond give us strength later. How early bonds give us strength later. A child raised in emotional safety carries a lifelong lift into relationships. As William James described in his emotional theory, there is a firstborn or a twiceborn in the world. A firstborn's life, when they're born, usually has two parents. It's soft and quiet and caring. They have toys and it's glorious. They're normally your managers. The twiceborn, when they're born into chaotic situations. Older siblings yelling and fighting over toys, mom and dad at work or coming home, pretty much domestic situations constantly before them. These people are considered the leaders of the world. They don't have what it takes to be patient, kind, manage their emotions, self reflect, try to make up solutions on a dime's notice.
Yo, if you haven't checked out Lo Jackson's You Only podcast yet, you're seriously missing out. Episodes like Can't Hurt Me and Emotional Intelligence hit me right in the feels and the brain. Lo breaks down big ideas so well, it's like mental cardio without the sweat. Honestly, it's the only podcast where you can get smarter and still not feel guilty for binge listening in your pajamas. You only podcast once. Might as well make it count.
I wanted to tell you guys about the Michelangelo phenomenon. Interpersonal process observed by psychologists in which close romantic partners influence or sculpt each other. Over time, the Michelangelo effect causes individuals to develop toward what they consider their ideal selves, pretty much. This happens because their partner sees them and acts around them in ways that promote this ideal. The phenomenon is referred to in contemporary marital therapy, recent popular work in couples therapy, and conflict resolution points to the importance of the Michelangelo phenomenon. Yeah, so if you want to learn more about that, check it out. It's pretty interesting. The phenomenon is significant, um, given that the self does not experience growth in complete isolation of the influence of others. Yet prior to 1999, much research on self growth consisted of examining individual processes. Research into the influence of others was neglected, even though those with whom the self interacts most regularly can lead to more consistent, stable changes in disposition and behavior. Because, like I've said in previous podcast, you become like the 5 people that you subject yourself to the most often.
If you loved the deep dive we took into emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman on You Only Podcast, then A General Theory of Love by Thomas Lewis, Fari Amini, and Richard Lannon will feel like it's soulful, poetic. While emotional intelligence gives you the science and skills to understand and manage emotions, A General Theory of Love wraps that same understanding in warmth, intimacy, and the sheer beauty of human connection. It blends psychology, neuroscience, and the tender reality of relationships, showing how our brains are literally wired for love and how early bonds shape our capacity for joy and healing. This book doesn't just inform you, it moves you the way only a conversation between heart and mind can. If emotional intelligence was about mastering the self, A General Theory of Love is about mastering the art of being human with others.
Partner affirmation appears in the model as 2 different parts. Partner affirmation names how partners bring about aspects of the ideal self from the self. Partner perpetual affirmation describes how a partner's views of the self aligns with the self's view of the ideal self. A partner will show greater partner perpetual affirmation if they believe the self to be or to be capable of being the ideal self. In other words, Jay will show more perpetual affirmation if he sees his partner Kaylee, whose ideal self includes being content as piano, as actually competent as at piano, or as capable of being competent at piano. Partner behavioral affirmation describes how a partner acts in a way that aligns with the ideal self. A partner such as Jay will show more partner behavioral affirmation if they act in a way such that Kaylee's ideal self can come forward, like a safe place, because that's what a home is supposed to be between 2 people and kids. It's supposed to be a place where if you're mad, feel free to go out in the garage and scream and yell. Don't do it. Don't yell at me and scream at me, but that's okay here, because we have to be there for each other emotionally at all times, for our kids, everything. We have to our mind is a weapon. You have to prepare it. You have to be ready for all circumstances, such as Jay. I was talking about Jay and Kaylee. Such as if he drives Kaylee to piano lessons. Self movement towards the ideal self describes how the distance between the self and the ideal self closes. Kaylee will experience self movement toward the ideal self when she becomes more competent at piano. And that was just a scenario. It's something to think about. And thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast, and hopefully you're enjoying this. I really want to share some other information with you because this book has left a mark on me. Like an instant idea worm wiggling around in my brain. The role of psychotherapists as actively shaping. Here, I want to share with you too, because now that I say that, this is a good point to share a reader's an emotional awakening after reading this book. And this is what they had to say. It touches upon everything: limbic resonance, regulation, revision. Truly dissect how love comes to determine who we become. Because the way you love is really who you become. Because like the Bible said, love heals all wounds. It heals a magnitude of things. And hate is a part of love. It is literally somebody, something about the situation, whatever happened, it made them angry and made them that way. And they were just so upset it didn't go their way, but they're not truly in tune with who they are at that time. And that's why they're just emotionally a mess. And sometimes people, their whole lives never get emotionally in tuned. And hopefully you learned a little bit about the Michelangelo phenomenon. I thought that was pretty awesome.
In A General Theory of Love, you'll discover how the science of the heart and mind explains why we crave connection and how love can heal what's been broken. You Only Podcast, where science meets soul and love becomes something you truly live.
I want to talk to you about culture and societal relevance with this book because I want to discuss how the book critiques societal ideas, kind of. Culture often values self sufficiency over emotional interdependency, yet the author argue we cannot be emotionally stable on our own, which I find that hard to believe. There's we have to, and which he's saying that in regards to self-isolation or people, the way people are in the times now, because a lot of people are just scrolling on their phones and isolated at home. If you ever get a chance to help somebody and get out with somebody, invite them, get them out there. We need to get more people out and about and doing things together because COVID really did a number on our society here in America, and it pretty much divided us in so many different crazy, weird ways. I wanted to reflect a little bit on Helen Fisher's work with MRI imaging, showing that romantic love activities deep brain reward circuits similar to hunger or addiction, reinforcing the biological necessity of connection. Helen Fisher's MRI research on deep romantic love profoundly changed how psychology and even neuroscience understands love today. Before her studies, love was largely the domain of poets, of philosophers, and psychologists, seen as emotion, attachment, or behavior. But Fisher made it biological and visible in the brain. And this is how he kind of did it. He mapped love to the brain, love, and he let people see that he let them see love as an emotion, not just emotion. He mapped love to the brain. Love is motivation, not just emotion. Fisher showed through MRI scans that people deeply in love have increased activity in the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, a region rich in dopamine associated with reward, craving, and motivation, which that's your addiction region of your brain. That stuff controls everything, and that's what a lot of our intake as eating and drinking is controlling our dopamine levels. And when people have anger issues and they're getting all mad and angry, or whatever, they're trying to get their dopamine levels raised up to feel somewhat happy. And this reframed love as a drive, like hunger or thirst, not just as a feeling. And that's the MRI scan that Helen did. The impact of this on psychologists, they began to understand romantic love as goal oriented survival mechanisms, not merely emotional attachments. Another thing that her MRI imaging revealed was reframed heartbreak as brain pain. And I have talked in previous podcasts that there's real negative electrical charges attached to mitochondrial cellulose in your heart when you feel sadness and sorrow and negativity. And sometimes people feel this stuff all their lives, and that's a form of it's because of traumas and PTSD and stuff like that. But Fisher also studied the brain of people who had been rejected in love. Think about that. The scans revealed that romantic rejection activates brain regions linked to craving, physical pain, and addiction withdrawal, such as the insula and anterior cingulate cortex, in which we talked about that a couple podcasts ago. I think in the road less traveled, legitimized heartbreak as a neurobiological trauma, influencing how therapists treat grief, loss, and obsessive thinking and breakups. change therapy models, neurochemical insights. Her work tied different stages of love to different neurochemicals: lust, testosterone and estrogen; romantic love, dopamine and neuroepinephrine; attachment, oxytocin and vasopressin. The impact of this helped psychologists and counselors tailor approaches for clients based on which stage of love or loss they're in, blending emotional and biological insight, which that makes sense. Reinvigorated evolutionary psychology. Fisher connected brain activation patterns and love to evolutionary survival strategies, pair bonding, reproductive success, and social cohesion. The impact of this provided a scientific bridge between evolutionary psychology and neuroscience, reinforcing that love is both ancient and adaptive. Challenged cultural notions of love by showing how universal the brain's love circuitry is across ages, genders, and cultures. Fisher helps psychologists debunk myths. Love isn't purely cultural, it's biological and cross cultural. Obsessing early in love is normal, not necessarily unhealthy. Rejection and longing aren't weaknesses, they're dopamine driven survival tactics. And the impact of this, her work influenced attachment theory, trauma informed therapy, and popular understandings of romance. Helen's Fisher MRI research helped transition love from a mystery to a measurable neural phenomenon. Her studies reshaped psychological thinking by biological romantic love, validating the pain of rejection, blending neuroscience with evolutionary and emotional framework. And I thought that was really awesome because it makes so much sense of why this book makes so much sense. Neuroplasticity in healing trauma is in a general theory of love. It showcases how emotional bonds can reshape neural patterns through therapy and empathy. Emotional resilience and connection reinforce themes of how relationships provide scaffolding for psychological healing. And to build scaffolding for psychological healing takes a safe place. And that starts with being with a partner who understands a human being and knows a woman's limitations and a man's limitations. Not to take what family members have shown us they did to their significant others and use those tactics to create some kind of power control or to make somebody feel something because they made you feel something. When somebody makes you feel something in a relationship, you have to talk it out. Communication is the most important thing in a relationship. And sometimes you're with somebody who is literally the whole relationship is emotionally disconnected. They don't know how to, express their love for you except for the words I love you. And you feel like actions speak louder than words, so it leaves you feeling a certain way. But as that person, you're responsible for yourself. You're responsible for your decisions. So when you decide to be with somebody, you need to be responsible enough to come back to the family table and sit down and have hard conversations as an adult and express after you understand truly the root feelings that you're having and express them to your significant other of how you feel, what's going on, and how can you make things better in a time you don't feel like things could get better. The chapter begins with a reference to Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, emphasizing the primal human emotions tied to love and loss. It questions the cultural understanding of relationships, arguing that while affiliation and care are assumed to be prevalent, many species lack such motivations. The text highlights how human emotional responses to loss, such as rage and tears, are unique and biologically grounded. Finding the bonds of attachment in these readings also.
Hey loves, I hope you're enjoying Lo Jackson's take on A General Theory of Love by Thomas Lewis, Fari Amini, and Richard Lannon. Every week we unpack powerful books, share juicy life insights, and dive into tips for emotional balance and mental stability. So grab your coffee, lean in, and let's grow together. One heart, one mind, one episode at a time.
Conrad Loren's research on imprinting illustrates how early life experiences shape behavior. Lorenz demonstrates that young birds imprint on the first moving object they see, showing the rigidity of attachment mechanisms in animals, which parallels human relationship. Historical examples of attachment studies, particularly by figures like Frederick II and Rene Spitz, indicate that human bonding is essential for survival, as seen in infants who suffer from neglect. John Bowlby and attachment theory links human behavior to evolutionary biology, asserting that children are born predisposed to bonds with caregivers. His research, despite its initial backlash from Freudian psychoanalysis, revealed how secure attachments foster emotional well-being. Children with responsive mothers exhibit positive traits such as social competence, resilience, while those with erratic or distant mothers displayed significant emotional issues as they matured. The role of early experiences, it plays a part in all this. Psychologist Mary Ainsworth expanded on Bowlby's ideas, identifying 3 types of attachment styles through her strange situation experiment. Children with secure attachments grew into well-adjusted adults, while those with insecure attachments faced emotional difficulties. This underscores the lasting impact of early nurturing on lifelong emotional health. Psychological responses to separation. The psychological effect of attachment and loss are examined in detail. When a puppy is separated from its mother, it exhibits distinct protest and despair phases that correspond with human emotional responses to loss. These biological reactions reveal how deeply interconnected emotional states are with psychological changes, such as hormonal fluctuations and heart rate variations. The impact of social isolation, which I've talked about that in several other podcasts. The chapter further explores how prolonged separation from caregivers leads to despair, resulting in noticeable health consequences. Adults experiencing loss can also suffer significant health declines, with research indicating that strong social connections positively influence recovery and longevity. And that's why I always tell you isolation is a terrible thing, you guys. It's not good for any human. Psychological and physiological interdependence. Research conducted by Myron Hoffer highlights how a mother's physical presence regulates her child's physiology. This mutual dependence leads to necessary interdependence in human relationships, particularly in how emotional states are regulated. The open loop of human physiology. The open loop of human physiology. Human beings require connection to maintain physiological stability. Children's early reliance on caregivers fosters a framework for future relationships, as limbic regulation underpins emotional health. This physical and emotional interdependence speaks to the essence of human nature to thrive in connection with others. The neurobiological basis of attachment. Neurotransmitters like serotonin opiates, and oxytocin play crucial roles in establishing and maintaining emotional connections. Opiates, for instance, mitigate pain during instances of loss, serving as a natural source of comfort. Oxytocin is linked to bonding behaviors, supporting the need for relationship connection. The intricate relationship between attachment and brain development emphasizes the necessity of social interaction for healthy, neutral growth. The intricate relationship between attachment and brain development emphasizes the necessity of social interaction and healthy neural growth. Isolated animals exhibit harmful behavior and the inability to bond, underscoring the deep-seated need for nurturing both the animal kingdom and human content. The power of love is real. The chapter concludes by reflecting on universal potential for attachment across species, highlighting that emotional bonds not only provide comfort but are integral for survival and societal functioning. Understanding the mechanisms of attachment can illuminate the complex and vital nature of human relationships, shaping our lives in profound ways. And hopefully you guys learned a lot right there, because I think that everything made sense in chapter 7, and it really brought this book together. I mean, imagine a time when you were feeling lost or isolated, perhaps after the end of a significant relationship. You notice how your heart ached, not just from sadness, but also from a sense of being adrift, a loss that permeated your very being. In those moments, you may have longed to reconnect with friends or family, realizing that their presence could lift the weight of your despair. The science behind this goes deeper. We thrive physically and emotionally when we form secure attachments with others. Your reactions, tears, anger, and a craving for intimacy are not merely emotional responses, but critical signals of biological need for connection. This illustrates how essential love and attachment are for thriving, showcasing the interconnectedness of our emotional and physical health. Thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast, and hopefully you have enjoyed listening to the general theory of love. How memory stores and shapes love. Memory serves as the foundation of our existence, binding our past experiences into a coherent identity. It allows for the continual adaptation and shaping of our mental framework, with neural pathways enabling learning and change. The physiological roots of memory are central to our identity and personal growth. The nature of memory. Memory encompasses both emotional knowledge and explicit recollections, with individuals often unable to fully articulate their desires and love. What is holding you back? The complexity arises from unconscious emotional memories, as suggested by Sigmund Freud, who viewed the unconscious as a storage space for repressed thoughts and memories. What repressed thoughts and memories are you holding on to that is holding you back in the moment with your significant other inside of that relationship? Modern neuroscience has demanded that memories are mutable rather than immutable. The dual memory systems. Researchers are discovering two types of memory systems: explicit and implicit. Explicit memory relates to conscious recall of events and facts, primarily facilitated by, guess what? The hippocampus, because that is what lies to us. It takes stories you've seen on TV, it takes other people's memories that they have falsified in their head, It takes feelings you got of other scenarios and relates it all back to that one memory and lies to us. So that's why when we age, people say, well, I can't really recall. I can't recall because the hippocampus puts so much garbage in there that you have to learn to govern that thing. In contrast, implicit memory functions outside of conscious awareness, allowing for the acquisition of skills and intuitive knowledge without recollection of the learning process itself. The challenges of explicit memory. Explicit memory can fail, as illustrated through cases of amnesia, where individuals can learn new skills yet cannot recall the experiences that led to learning. The experimental findings indicate that implicit memory allows for learning that does not require conscious engagement or awareness. It's like you're just there and you know. Kind of wild. Development of memory in childhood as well. Children experience a developmental progression in their memory systems, with implicit memory functioning from birth while explicit memory matures over time. Emotional learning occurs via implicit memory, which requires the formation of emotional learning occurs via implicit memory, which requires the formation of attachments and social learning processes. The dynamics of implicit memory in relationships is implicit memory shapes our perceptions of love and relationships, where individuals may wittingly replicate patterns learned from childhood, like I talked about earlier, impacting their future romantic encounters. And a lot of times they're tragic. I expressed to you in one of my podcasts how one of my aunts dated a guy that beat her almost to death, and I seen her, and it traumatized me forever. And such patterns reflect deep-rooted emotional knowledge that often goes unexamined. And that's the dynamics of implicit memory in relationships. And understanding memory's influence on reality is important as well, because implicit memory impacts perceptions and interpretations of reality, and that has to do with your hippocampus. This subjectivity means that emotional experiences are uniquely personal, influencing how individuals perceive others and their interactions within different relational contexts. Memory, both implicit and explicit, plays crucial role in shaping emotions, identities, and understanding of love, presents both the strengths and limitations of our awareness in navigating personal relationships. So I want to jump back to chapter 6, and chapter 6 is a bend in the road, and we have all experienced that bend in the road, and that's how love changes who we are and who we become. This chapter discusses the complexities of love and how it influences our identities through a blend of emotional and cognitive processes. It illustrates these themes using the analog of a hospital patient's experience, delving into medical diagnoses, technology, and the workings of the human brain. And I love incorporating the human brain into this podcast because it just makes it so much better, and the intersection of medicine and technology. The chapter begins with the case study of a heart attack patient, and that's unique to my situation and how I wound up getting severe PTSD. My dad passed away on Father's Day 1988, and I remember going to the hospital and walking in, and the doctor, as soon as we walked in the door, the doctor walked out and said, "I'm sorry, folks, he didn't make it." And I could see my dad with all these tubes in his head. And I can remember that day like it was yesterday. I can remember the sun shining. I can remember everybody's faces. I can remember everybody's feelings, everything at that moment. And I felt like the earth stood still that day. And I went on to, my dad's second wife took me home to my grandma's house where me and my mom lived at the time, and it was just a painful day all the way around. And in those moments, though, I really became so encapsulated in my own mind for a long time and had no idea because my dad left Within 5 weeks, like all the hair on my body fell out. It was wild. So understanding neural networks, they pretty much mimic the brain's capability to learn from experience, adjusting connections among neurons to enhance memory and understanding. This technology reveals insights into human emotional processes, underscoring how love and emotional experiences can literally change brain structures, neuroplasticity, everything. Memory formation and dynamics. Memories are formed through the firing of neurons in specific sequences, resulting in lasting connections that shape our behaviors and identities. The chapter discusses Donald Hebb's theory on how memory works, illustrating that memories are strengthened through repetition and experience, leading to an evolving understanding of our past. And it's really important to understand our past because it is a tool to really understand our present and becoming present and helping us grow into a brighter future as we learn to navigate trying times or happy times, even because sometimes people get so happy that they get disconnected from everybody else and don't realize their happiness is actually causing people pain. And it's a type of toxicity. And thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast.
If you loved the deep dive we took into emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman on You Only Podcast, then A General Theory of Love by Thomas Lewis, Fari Amini, and Richard Lannon will feel like its soulful, poetic sister. While emotional intelligence gives you the science and skills to understand and manage emotions, A General Theory of Love wraps that same understanding in warmth, intimacy, and the sheer beauty of human connection. It blends psychology, neuroscience, and the tender reality of relationships, showing how our brains are literally wired for love and how early bonds shape our capacity for joy and healing. This book doesn't just inform you, it moves you the way only a conversation between heart and mind can. If emotional intelligence was about mastering the self, A General Theory of Love is about mastering the art of being human with others.
Navigating emotional life. Due to the complexities of the Truian brain, individuals cannot directly command their emotional experiences. Emotional responses arise more from the limbic brain than from logical reasoning, which can create disconnects between aspiration and actual feelings. Understanding love is not easy. None of us are love gurus. So, to grasp the essence of love, one must begin with understanding feelings rather than intellectualizing them. And we need to dive deeper into emotional landscapes, moving beyond abstract thought to foundational aspects of love. And how we sense the inner world of others' hearts says a lot about us. In the chapter Archimedes' principle that a body submerged in water experiences an upward force equal to the weight of displaced water. Springs of life through the legend of Archimedes, discovering it while bathing. Divorce rate trends. The divorce rate in 2024 hovered around 2.4 divorces per 1,000 people, indicating a steady decline from higher rates in earlier decades. Likelihood of divorce, roughly 35 to 40% of first marriages end in divorce, with second and third marriages facing even higher rates, up to 60 and 70% for second marriages. The leading causes: lack of commitment, infidelity, excessive conflict, young age at marriage, financial stress, and domestic violence are among the top reasons. Demographic insights: younger couples under 30 see higher divorce rates. About 48% of first marriages in this group end in divorce. Education matters. Those with a college degree face much higher divorce rates, 46%, compared to those with bachelor's degrees. 29%. Other influences: the COVID-19 pandemic increased singles by about 13 million in 2022 compared to pre-pandemic levels, reflecting disruption in relationships and social norms. Happy singles versus coupled individuals. Gen Z and millennials. Many young adults are choosing singlehood. 37% of single under 30 are not interested in dating, and half are not actively looking. Teens dating less. High school seniors dating in the past year dropped from 80% in 2000 to 45% by 2023. Estrangement from dating culture. Trends like boy girl sober reflect deliberate abstinence from relationships and sex in favor of self focus, especially from Gen Z. AI companionship is emerging as a substitute for romantic connection, though experts warn it may hinder real relationship development. Lifestyle shifts. Many singles find liberation and self growth in being single, a move away from traditional relationship expectations. Why people are dating less, cause and effect. Cause: app burnout and paradox of choice. Effect: swiping feels superficial, discourages commitment. Dialogue fatigue and pen pal stage leads to friend mediated matchmaking as a more meaningful alternative. Educational and gender gaps. More educated women struggle to find similarly matched partners, skewing dating options. Mental health and loneliness. High rates of loneliness, 80% of Gen Z, paired with fear of rejection, make dating feel unsafe. Technology driven isolation. Teens favor ambiguous situationships via digital platforms, sidelining real world bonding. Divorce rates continue to decline, especially among better educated and financially stable couples. Younger generations increasingly opt out of dating, often embracing singlehood for autonomy or due to emotional tolls of modern relationship culture. Dating fatigue, social fragmentation, economic pressures, and evolving values have reshaped how or even whether people pursue romantic relationships today.
Love isn't just a feeling, it's the invisible thread that rewires our hearts, heals our wounds, and reminds us we're never truly alone. The way we love and allow others or ourselves to be loved shapes every beat of our soul. Socrates was well known for being a Greek philosopher or father of Western philosophy. He was known for the Socratic method, asking probing questions to get to the truth. Are you asking probing questions to get to the truth with the person you truly love? Are you in love with somebody and not telling them, or with hiding true raw emotions? Plato was Socrates' student, and without Plato, we would have never even heard of Socrates because Pluto recorded everything that Socrates taught him. Unfortunately, Socrates died of poisonous hemlock. It looks like carrots, and that's probably what he thought it was, the greens, and he ate it and he died. Plato is the founder of the Academy in Athens and champion of the theory of forms, the idea that ultimate reality exists beyond what we can see. So, when our significant other is acting a certain way, can we ultimately see a reality that exists beyond what we can see in that moment? Take these philosophers, study them, use them in the ways of love. They were all professionals at the art of love. Aristotle was Plato's student, and his work was on ethics, politics, logic, and science formed the foundation for Western thought for centuries. And they're still teaching his teachings today. In all the universities in the United States, they teach a way to communicate professionally through Aristotle's teachings, and that's ethos, pathos, logos. That really has to do with thinking critically and logically. Are we thinking critically and logically in love, life, and relationships? Or are we allowing the stressors of the day to reign and rule our minds in the moments when we should be thankful for and grateful for everything that we have? That's why a lot of counselors or self help people always say you need to start a gratitude journal. You should start a gratitude journal. Well, gratitude also can be done while you lay in your bed at nighttime, and it's a way to practice love because being grateful for everything forms a type of love inside of yourself. C.S. Lewis wrote a book called The Four Types of Love. And in that book, he describes waves slapping against the boat. And it's the most explicit writing of water slapping against a boat that I had ever read in my life. And it was a love. He was speaking of a love that he had at the time. And that book's a good read. It's interesting. And it takes somebody with a really sophisticated mind to understand and get the four loves that C.S. Lewis talks about. But today, we're talking about a general theory of love, and this is a wonderful book. Get out there and check it out, and hopefully, we all are experiencing love in our lives and we're sharing it with others because with love comes responsibility and protected values and morals that we hold inside of ourselves. And to share those things with other people means that it's kind of like the videos you've seen where there's one guy that's yellow and everybody around him's gray, and he starts talking to somebody, and then that person turns yellow, and then that person starts talking to somebody, and by the time everybody talks to each other, everybody turns yellow because that's the way humans and animals work. When you treat somebody with kindness and respect and love and caring and have emotional intelligence and social awareness of being aware of other people's emotions and how their body language looks, the tone they're using, and having ways inside of your own mind to diffuse situations where people are aggressive. And sometimes people are certain ways and they don't even know they're being that way because they have had so much going on that they're literally checked out of how they're behaving and they don't self-reflect. And reflection in life is the most important thing you could do. I would say more important than a gratitude journal would be a reflection journal because you can look back and think about how you thought things were and how they should be. And as time goes on, you'll learn more things when you write out a reflection journal about habits, personality traits, character traits, different relationship flaws. You'll find all kinds of things when you journal. And I've journaled all kinds of different stuff, and I have an invention journal too. So when I have an idea, I write it down, I draw it out. Not saying that any of them are great, but it's a learning tool that I've used for several years, and it really makes my mind develop all kinds of different ideas. Not that they're ever going to go anywhere, but it exercises my brain to the point that I'm using it and giving it different avenues of development that normally I wouldn't have had I not just written down that stuff. Because I go back to those drawings and writings that I make and I work on them every now and then just to see if I come up with something interesting or not. And that's what you should do too. Start a journal about something that you enjoy doing that it doesn't take much to do. It ain't exerting you in any sort of way that it's going to, be like work. So, anyways, thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast and a general theory of love. Get out there and check it out. You can find it on Amazon, Google. You can find it at all the bookstores, anywhere, Barnes and Noble. Tons of places carry this book. It's a good one. Check it out. Thank you guys again for listening, and hopefully you enjoyed. And follow me, and please give me a 5-star review if you will. I really appreciate it. I love you, fans.